Hello, my name is Nick Rolfe and I'm here to give my presentation on Alon Confino. Why did the Nazis burn the Hebrew Bible? According to the Nazis, Jews were responsible for Bolshevism, communism, Marxism, socialism, liberalism, conservatism, pacifism, cosmopolitanism, materialism, atheism, democracy, for the defeat in the First World War, the 1918 November Revolution and the Weimar Republic, for Weimar's culture of entertainment and cabarets and the club scene, as well as for sexual freedom, psychoanalysis, feminism, homosexuality, and abortions, for modernist, atonal, and jazz music, for Bauhaus architecture, and for abstract painting as represented by Impressionism, Post-Impressionism, Cubism, Dadaism, and Expressionism. On November 9th and 10th, 1938, not one but thousands of Hebrew Bibles were burnt in hundreds of communities across the Reich. Not only in major places such as Berlin, Vienna, Dresden, Cologne, but in smaller communities such as Salzburg, a Protestant village in Baden with a population of about 1,070, 10% or 120 of them being Jewish. Stone tablets of the Ten Commandments were thrown from rooftops, and the Nazis marched mockingly up and down the streets with the Torah scrolls before destroying them. By fire and all other means, the destruction of the Book of Books was at the centre of Kristallnacht, otherwise known as the Night of Broken Glass, when 1,400 synagogues were set on fire. Destroying the Hebrew Bible in small communities was an open event that no one could ignore. Perpetrators, including children, were allowed to act in certain ways that go beyond the constraints of accepted cultural norms of behaviour. At times, these ceremonies were quite elaborate, as happened in Fürth in Bavaria. In the middle of the night, the Jews were taken to the synagogue, where they were forced to sing the Nazi Horst Wessel song, and the rabbi similarly forced to read from Hitler's Mein Kampf. Events like these happened all over the Reich, particularly on the 9th and 10th of November 1938, and were looked upon with distaste by Europe. Why did this happen? How did this happen? And what motivated a number of apparently drunk soldiers to start these hostilities in the first place? Alon Confino, writing this piece in 2012, states some startling facts concerning the Nazis and the German public, which may well have some influenced these events, and through this publication it is hoped to gain more of an insight on this question. Confino believes that the silence or lack of historiography concerning the burning of the Bible demands an explanation, especially when one considers that the sources that he has used to reconstruct this event are readily available to scholars. He does, however, feel that the reason for the lack of research has been down to scholars viewing the Third Reich as having racial ideology as their ultimate source of motivation. He continues, "There is nothing in racial ideology itself that can explain the symbolic meaning of destroying synagogues in the Bible, which is also the first 5 chapters of the Christian Bible. The insight that the Nazis set out to build a racial civilization should be at the beginning of an interpretive work to understand the Holocaust. It is not that current historiography has not been able to answer the question, it is rather that it has not been able to pose it." Slide 3. This can be illustrated by briefly considering the case of the historiography of the Kristallnacht. It is focused mainly on 2 topics: the interactions among Hitler, his closest allies, Goebbels, party organisations and all levels of German society in setting off and undertaking the violence. Number 2, the reactions of the German population and international public opinion. Slide 4. Alan Steinweiss's publication Kristallnacht, 1938. Slide 5. Richard J. Evans, The Third Reich in Power, 1933-39. Slide 6. Saul Friedlander, Nazi Germany and the Jews, Years of Persecution. These three distinguished books illustrate the state of affairs very well, but none of them actually discuss the burning of the Bible, apart from the anecdotal mentions, and they merely place the blame on drunken soldiers. The presence of the past has not figured as an interpretive key in major studies of the Holocaust and the Third Reich. This is quite remarkable, because perceptions of the past are fundamental to the making of every society and are particularly revealing in societies that pronounce a break with the past. What was that sense of the past in the Third Reich that made the persecution and extermination of Jews conceivable, justifiable, and possible, that led to the burning of the Bible? Well, the Nazis chose as the main enemy the Jews, an ancient people with a long history and a fundamental role in Christian, European and German society, an important player in the making of modernity, as well as the source of long tradition of positive and negative moral, religious and historical symbols, while the Germans represented the Third Reich, or the dawn of a new era. Between 1933 and 1939, the idea of a Germany without Jews was already in the process of being realized. A major task had been to describe aspects of the persecution of the Jews between 1933 and 1945. The basic task of all history writing, to tell what the case is, has been immensely difficult and a lot of work, and has only really begun to appear since the 1970s. In addition, there's been a view among historians, that the Holocaust stands totally outside the normal course of history. There's been nothing like it, that it is unique and comparable in such a way that regular historical approaches and methods do not apply. We know that concepts of race and space, derived from studies of colonialism and empire, fit well when applied to Nazi policy and ideology. But concepts of colonial time did not fit the Nazi project at all. Whatever the Nazis thought of the inferior fellow Europeans, they operated within European civilization in terms of shared history, culture and Christianity. Colonial empires, in contrast, set out to conquer cultures and societies viewed as distinctly outside their own European civilization. The Nazis may have considered the Soviets subhuman, but Pushkin, Dostoevsky and Tolstoy were all read and admired in Berlin, whereas the culture of colonized peoples in, say, Africa were not viewed part or equal to, say, British or French, and were viewed differently. The burning of the Bible is one element in a Nazi construction of historical narrative of origins, of historical memory, in which the Bible symbolized historical roots and morality that the Nazis wished to supersede. As early as the late 19th century, several leading German liberal Protestants called for full separation of Christianity from Judaism. Some agreed that the stubborn Jewish resistance to acknowledge Jesus as the Messiah is attributable to an immutable Jewish racial character. Adolf von Harnack, one of the leading Protestant theologians of the 20th century, proposed to separate the Old Testament from Christianity. In 1920, he published his study on Marcion of Sinope, the 2nd century Christian preacher who taught that the God of mercy of the New Testament from Christianity had nothing to do with the flawed, angry God of the Old Testament, and that Christianity and Judaism must be totally disconnected. Just to recap here, we have a great deal of interest in religious matters, coming from very different directions during these early times in Germany. More importantly, it can be seen that prior to the event of World War II, the Jewish people were viewed differently by the people of Germany. Now, an image starts to emerge as to the cause of the burning of the Bible and the hatred towards Jews. Slide 7. Karl Barth, The Epistle to the Romans. Karl Barth, writing in 1933, even proposed a theological new departure to Epistle to the Romans. This work, believed originally to be written by Paul the Apostle, is the 6th book of the New Testament, and explains that salvation is offered through the gospel of Jesus. The Institute for the Study and Eradication of Jewish Influence on German Church Life had the aims of creating a Judaized influence on German church and formulating new biblical interpretations. The institute opened on May 6, 1939 in the Wartburg Castle, ironically, where in 1521 Luther translated the New Testament into Germany. Walter Grunman, professor of New Testament at the University of Jena and the academic director of the institute, explained in his keynote address that the elimination of Jewish influences on German life is the urgent and fundamental question of the present German religious situation. And he advocated the removal of the Old Testament from the Christian Bible because it was simply a Jewish book. To recap here again, it is obvious that academics in Germany were promoting anti-Jewish tendencies during these times, and that the German public were being raised to accept them as norm. It reflected the popular appeal of the German Christian movement among Protestants of the Third Reich, and most important, the idea of a Germany without Jews and Judaism as a whole. For members and associates of the Institute, many from a younger generation of theologians and scholars are early Christian trained by German leading professors in the finest universities. The aim was both theological and notional, to eradicate Judaism in order to purify both Christianity and Germany. Slide 8. Susanna Heschel, the Aryan Jesus. Susanna Heschel has observed that this was to frame Nazism as the very fulfillment of Christianity, and Christ as the reason for Nazi Germany's fight against the Jews. To explain this is to say that the Nazi Party were the saviours of Christianity, the people who saved Christianity from this evil Jewish people, and because of the crucifixion, they will persecute the Jewish people. By mid-1939, Jews and Judaism had already been destroyed, and in 1940 the Institute erased the Jews from one foundational site of memory, whose spirit and essence they defined since its inception, the New Testament. The Institute then publicized a de-Judaized New Testament, Die Botschaft Gottes, or the Message of God, even though the true Old Testament had been eliminated years before. All references to Jewish names and places have been erased from the new biblical text, as well as quotations from the Old Testament unless they portrayed Judaism in a negative light. The new text, which portrayed Jesus as militarized, masculine, heroic, with a Nazified language, focused on his triumphs rather than his defeat. 200,000 copies were sold during the war. Overall, the main point that emerges here is that the removal of the Old Testament from Christianity was not simply a Nazi idea or a crude Nazification of Christianity. These ideas were discussed and debated by serious Protestant theologians, as well as some Catholics, long before the Nazi movement gained any significant power. Slide 9. Max Damaris, Hitler, Speeches and Propagations, 1932 to 1945. To bolster this claim, Max Damaris agrees and states that anti-Semitism was rife in Germany for many decades before the war. For the Nazis wanted to remove the Jewish factor of the past and insert their new ideology and start history again. What the Jews symbolized for the Nazis were origins that had to be removed for the new Germany to rise. The Jews, as possessor of origins, of the present and the past, and of the future, rang strong in the memory of Nazis and made the basis for the fancy that made the persecution and extermination of the Jews possible, or at least desirable. Nazi racism was not primarily about biology, it was about the menace to the spirits created by the body. The Nazi belief was that the body was the raw material, but the essential issue was how the raw material impacted the spirit. What's meant here is that the attitude of the Nazis to the Jewish community was spiritual and against what they stood for, i.e. religion, morals, and basically everything else. It was not the Jewish body per se that posed a danger, but the Jewish spirit produced by his body. Suffice to say that what they hated about the Jews was their culture and religion and their intrinsic nature, or essence. Biology and spirit cannot be separated, but when we focus on scientific biology, we limit our understanding of the meaning of Nazi ideas. Biology constructed for Germans a moral category of right and wrong because they believed of the way it determined the spirit, or, to use correct terminology, their culture. As such, racism mixed elements other than just biology, forging their identities. Alon Confino's hypothesis is that for the Nazis, the Jews symbolized time. The persecution and extermination of the Jews was driven by Nazi desire to control memory and history. Nazism was an act of creation of a new society, a new racial civilization for Germany, Europe, and the rest of the world, based on the persecution and extermination of groups of people. Precisely because it saw itself as a radical, novel historical departure, Nazism paid particular attention to the past. This view is fit with a broader pattern of characteristic of all national and revolutionary movements in the modern world that sought to build a new life based on invented and constructed memories. At the beginning of this exercise, it was pointed out that children were taking part in Kristallnacht. They were even dismissed from school so they could take part. These children, like the drunken soldiers, were being taught, like older generations before them, that Judaism was not acceptable and anti-Semitism was the norm in Germany, and that one day there would be a world without them. Thank you.